The tools that a hunter uses to bring down the beasts in Monster Hunter World are vast and varied, but none are more important than the weapons they use. I'm Darcblade, and in this series of the Monster Hunter World weapons, we are going to be taking a look at the various weapons and tools of the game. In this episode, we're going to bring you an overview guide of the Lance. The Lance is a powerful weapon when it comes to defense. With one of the largest shields in the game, it's able to block the majority of monsters' attacks. However, thanks to its focus on blocking an attack rather than dodging it, its mobility is quite slow. Despite that though, the weapon does have some damage options. Thanks to the Lance being a very long-reaching weapon, you're able to hit a monster at quite a distance. It is also one of the rare weapons where you can actually guard and still attack a monster at the same time, making it a very tank-focused weapon. Now let's move into the basics of the Lance. Now remember, for the purpose of this series I have been quoting PlayStation controls, although you can look down in the description below for translated buttons or work them out yourself depending on what system you are using. Now the first basic move for the Lance is the mid thrust. This is done by pressing triangle. This is a standard thrust with the Lance. Next is wide sweep, which is done by pressing triangle and circle. As the name would suggest, this causes your hunter to perform a wide sweep with the Lance covering quite a radius. This comes in useful for hitting multiple body parts or when you're surrounded by smaller enemies. Next is high thrust, which is done by pressing circle. High thrust is the attack you'll want to use if fighting monsters that are either taller than you or are flying. If you can't hit them with mid thrust, then focusing on high thrust is a must, especially if the monster's weak point is high above you. Next is counter thrust, which is done by pressing R2 and then circle. This can also be charged up by holding down circle to unleash a high damaging attack. Next is guard, which is done by holding R2. This will allow you to block a monster's attack, but on top of that it will allow you to perform a second set of secondary moves. Whilst guarding, you can press triangle to perform a guard thrust. This is very similar to the mid thrust attack, but allows you to block at the same time. Next is dash attack, which is done by pressing triangle and circle. This causes your hunter to charge towards a monster's location. And then finally, while guarding, if you use the left stick and triangle, it will allow your hunter to guard dash to a location. This is sort of like a short bunny hop. Guard dash combined with your standard dash, which is done with direction and X, allows the hunter to stay relatively close to a monster and alleviates some of the movement restrictions the Lance comes with. Now let's move on to talk about the unique functions available to the Lance. The first is counter thrust. As I already mentioned, this is done by performing R2 and then circle. However, there is a unique aspect to this move. When you perform the move, whether you're holding it to charge it up or not, if you should successfully block a monster's attack whilst your shield is up, then you will immediately perform an automatic counter attack on the monster. This deals decent damage as well. This comes in very useful against highly aggressive monsters. The next unique function is the power guard. Now whilst you're performing a counter thrust or during other guard reactions, if you should press R2 and X, you will go into a power guard stance. This is probably one of the most defensive moves in the game. It will allow you to block even more attacks and reduce the stun effect you normally get from blocking a monster's attack. If you should block a monster's attack with power guard, you can also quickly follow it up with an attack of your own. The only trouble with power guard is that whilst it's active, it will drain your stamina, unfortunately. But despite that, if you know a monster's attack pattern, this can come in very useful for blocking the more dangerous attacks the monster has. The next unique function is the dash attacks. Whilst you're guarding with R2, you can press triangle and circle to perform this attack. Now this attack will make your hunter start running towards the monster. The longer they run as well, the faster they'll become, eventually entering a charged state. You can steer it slightly with the left stick as well, but when you're ready to attack with it, there are numerous options available to you. X will cancel the attack, triangle will perform a finishing thrust, moving the left stick and X will cause you to jump, and pressing back and X will force you to turn around 180 degrees. So it's worth experimenting with this to what is best. A side note is if you get enough momentum and you do perform the jump, if you follow that up with an attack, you can potentially mount a monster. Now let's move away from the unique functions to talk about the basic combos available to the Lance. The first is a very basic combo which is done by pressing triangle, triangle, triangle. You can then follow this up by pressing back and X to reset your position to perform the combo a second time. This works great against smaller monsters or if you're attacking a larger monster's leg. However, against flying monsters it's not as useful. Against flying monsters or whose weak points are high up, you can replace triangle by pressing circle, 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 and then back and X to reset the position. The next basic combo is a closing attack while guarding. So this is done by holding R2 to guard and then forwarding triangle to do a guard dash, follow it up with circle, and then follow it up with either triangle or circle. And the final basic combo is an endless thrusting combo. This is done by pressing R2 and circle for that counter thrust, follow that up with triangle or circle again, and then repeat. So it would be R2 and circle again, and then triangle or circle. As you can see, most of the basic combos are very basic with the lance. The attacks aren't the most stylish, but nonetheless they can be effective if used right. Now let's move on to the pros and cons of the lance. The major pro for the weapon is its high defense. The large shield and numerous defensive abilities make it a weapon that allows your hunter to become very durable. Counter thrust combined with power guard allows you to turn the tide on a monster so long as you can get the monster's attention. With that being said, the Challenger Mantle could be very useful if you're considering using this weapon. The next biggest pro for the weapon is its reach. It is a very long weapon, and you're able to hit monsters without having to be right up close to their face. Also with moves like the High Thrust, which is the circle attack, it allows you to attack monsters that are either airborne or attack a monster's weak point should it be higher on its body. However, the biggest con for the lance, unfortunately, is its weight, and thus the speed reduction on your hunter. You move very slow with this weapon, making it very cumbersome to use. You can alleviate this slightly with your dash stepping and guard dashing, but nonetheless it is still a major con of the weapon and you have to get used to moving at a slower pace. Now overall the lance is a surprise weapon. It took a little while to get used to, but it definitely has its uses. If you are using a lance and you're using it correctly, there's not much of a chance of a monster knocking you out, at least not quickly. So long as you're able to read a monster and successfully block its attacks, you should be able to follow it up with counter attacks and then follow that up with easy combos. Like I said, the basic combos are very basic. They're not very flashy when compared to some of the other weapons in the game, but they are nonetheless efficient. Again, as I already mentioned as well, if you're using the Challenger Mantle, then you can perform a tank roll, grabbing a monster's attention, drawing them away from your squishier teammates. If you want your hunter to be a bastion of defense, then really consider taking the lance into battle. Now remember that these first series of videos are overviews taken from the Monster Hunter World Beta. Once the game is fully released, expect much more in-depth videos for the various weapons and tools of the game. And until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you an overview guide of the lance in Monster Hunter World. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.